Hey everyone, I'm James, this is Deep Humanism, and today I'm going to be talking about the 10 biggest misconceptions about humanism. I've been a professional humanist for more than 10 years now, and in that time I've spoken to thousands of people about humanism. Most of them know nothing about it at all. They respond with a blank stare whenever you bring up humanism. But even those who know something about it, including many atheists and some humanists, have some of these misconceptions. So in this video, I'm going to dispel them all. These are the 10 biggest misconceptions about humanism. Number 10, humanists have no beliefs. Now, this is a weird one, but I've encountered it plenty of times. Some people think that humanists have no positive beliefs of their own. One example, when I was appointed to my current role as lead chaplain at a UK university, it made the papers because I was the first humanist to take on a position like that. And someone wrote a letter into the Times about me saying I was a person with no discernible beliefs. Now, I hope I don't have to tell you that I do actually have beliefs. Humanists do have positive beliefs. Yes, I'm an atheist. Yes, I'm not religious. But I'm not only those things. I have positive beliefs about human life and dignity, about meaning and purpose, about our future and destiny. And those beliefs shape my life as much as the religious beliefs of many religious people do. So it's simply not true that humanists have no positive beliefs. Number 9. Humanists worship human beings. Some people think that humanism is like a religion, but instead of worshipping God, we worship humanity. For example, in Tim LaHaye and David Nobel's very strange book, Mind Siege, The Battle for Truth in the New Millennium, seriously, it is a weird book about a cabal of progressive organizations trying to take over the world and institute world socialism and humanism. If only. You find this quote: Theism and humanism do not differ from the act of worship. They differ from the object of worship. Theists worship God. Humanism worships man. Thanks to Rational Wiki for that example. Now, this is simply false. Humanism does not elevate anything, including human beings, to the level of a god to be worshipped. We see human beings as related to all other life on this planet, and no more worthy of worship than, say, dolphins. Although dolphins are pretty cute, so if you want to worship some of them, be my guest. Number 8. Humanism is purely concerned with human beings and is therefore speciesist. This is misleading. It's certainly true that human beings are at the center of humanist philosophy and thought. And that's because we recognize that a philosophy generated by human beings has to begin with human experience of the world. It's true, too, that humanism has sometimes been overly focused on humanity to the exclusion of other animals. So there is a reasonable critique in here that I will explore in other videos. But humanism is unusual among the major worldviews because it explicitly recognizes that human beings are related to all other animals, that human beings are themselves animals. It's actually traditional religions that elevate human beings above other animals by saying that we are ontologically special, created in the image of the divine, animated by the divine breath, for example. By placing people in relationship to other animals rather than above them, humanism actually respects other animals better. This is part of the reason why many of the major promoters of animal rights today and in history have themselves been humanists. I think of legendary zoologist Jane Goodall, who called our responsibility toward other animals a humanistic responsibility. At its best then, and when properly understood, humanism is not speciesist. It recognizes the deep relationships between human beings and all other animals, placing us on the same ontological level as them, and says that we owe the same moral regard to other animals that we owe to human beings. And that isn't speciesist in any definition of the term. Number 7, humanists are all postmodernists. This one makes me smile because it's so philosophically confused, but it's something I hear often, particularly from conservative media in the United States. Now, strictly speaking, self-conscious humanism, the humanist movement that I'm a part of today, the group of people and organizations that call ourselves humanists, started at least as far back as the 1930s and the publication of the first Humanist Manifesto in the United States. At least. That makes it, contemporary humanism, much older than postmodernism, which came to the fore in the 1970s. So simply from that fact alone, the decades that separated the birth of both movements, you would think it would be odd if humanists all suddenly converted to postmodernism. But second, many prominent postmodernist thinkers declared themselves anti-humanists, distancing themselves from the humanistic intellectual trends that were around when postmodernism was developing. People like Foucault, Derrida, and Lyotard are all major postmodern philosophers and all people who called themselves anti-humanist. They rejected humanism. Now, this is philosophically complicated because what they meant by humanism and what contemporary humanists like me mean by humanism might not have been exactly the same thing. And there's a lot of wrangling in the literature about whether these thinkers might be considered humanists under some definition of the term and what humanism and anti-humanism even mean. But it's certainly the case that many major postmodernist thinkers identified themselves as opposed to humanistic understandings of the world. At the same time, many prominent humanists have explicitly opposed postmodernism, and many of them still do. So this is complex territory, but simply put, there is no easy overlap of postmodernist and humanist ideas. These are different traditions of thought and don't automatically coincide. Number 6, humanists are all socialists or communists. Here's another one I've encountered a lot in America, and particularly from the same people who think that we're all postmodernists as well. There is something interesting about this one, a little kernel of truth, because many of the early humanists were enthusiastic about radically different economic models, including socialism and communism. The first Humanist Manifesto in 1933 declared that the existing acquisitive and profit-motivated society has shown itself to be inadequate and called for a socialized and cooperative economic order. And that does sound like socialism to me. But two things to note here. First, socialism is not communism. We should be careful to distinguish those, and anybody who relates them as if they're exactly the same thing is simply not a serious commentator on this topic. But second, and more important, humanism is a non-dogmatic philosophy, and it's more concerned with the way we come to our beliefs than with the beliefs we ultimately hold. And so the humanist movement has never required or expected all humanists to share the same political views. In fact, that very first Humanist Manifesto that called for the socialized economic order that I just quoted said right at the beginning of it that it was designed to represent a developing point of view, not a new creed. And other humanist manifestos that came later have reiterated this idea that there's no humanist creed. Humanists don't all need to believe the same things. And so today, some humanists are sympathetic to socialism. like me. Many humanists are not. It's certainly not true that humanists are all socialists or communists. Number 5. Humanism is an exclusively rational worldview. Here's one I get from humanists themselves sometimes, as well as critics. Humanism is exclusively or primarily about rational inquiry. Now, it's true. Humanists are committed to using our best intellectual tools to understand our experience, and rational inquiry is one of the most powerful of those tools. But humanism has never been about just rational inquiry. Humanism embraces all of human experience, not just that can be captured or expressed through rational discourse. And we understand that we use many tools to make sense of our experience, and not everything is reducible to a thin rationality. Humanists are not and have never been Spock. Hell, even Spock was not Spock. He was half human and had emotions, and they were important to his life. Humanists are not exclusively rational, and the humanist worldview does not promote the rational to the exclusion of every other area of life. Number 4. Humanism is just a nice word for atheism. I've heard this one a lot, often from other atheists. The idea that humanism is simply a less confrontational way of saying that you're an atheist. But that's totally wrong. Obviously, there's nothing inherently confrontational about calling yourself an atheist. If people think there is, that is a them problem, not an us problem. There's no need for a nice word for atheism because atheism is a perfectly nice word, and most humanists are indeed atheists. But while being an atheist just means someone doesn't believe in God, being a humanist means a lot more. It's a whole worldview, philosophy, or life stance with positive ethical and existential commitments. You can totally be an atheist and not a humanist. An atheist nihilist, for instance, who doesn't believe in God, but also doesn't believe in the reality of any human values, would definitely not be a humanist. Humanism and atheism are not the same. Saying you're a humanist commits you to a whole lot more than simply saying that you're an atheist, and therefore humanism is not just a nice word for atheism. Number 3. Humanists hate religion. Some humanists do hate religion. That's fair. And sometimes it's for understandable reasons. Some people have been hurt profoundly by religion in their lives and have not experienced it as a force for good. And in those situations, I think it's fair, or at least understandable, that people don't feel positively toward religion in general. But humanism as a worldview is not anti-religion, and certainly does not promote hatred of any particular religion. Sometimes humanists will criticize specific beliefs and practices of some religions because we consider them wrong or inhumane, just as members of some religions sometimes criticize members of other religions for the belief and practices that are against their own values. But that doesn't mean that we hate religion. Not all critique comes from a place of hatred. In fact, most of it does not. In general, humanism promotes a sophisticated response to religion, seeing it as a human-created cultural phenomenon. We think that it has good elements and bad elements, and we want to maintain the good elements of religion while retiring what is bad. And that is simply not hatred. Number 2. Humanists have nothing to say about religion. Related to the previous one, some believe that humanists have nothing useful to say about religion or spirituality or the existential questions that trouble us all sometimes. I've heard this not only from critics of humanism, but from fellow chaplains who represent other religious traditions. They don't think that humanists like me should be able to talk about the sacred, the divine, the holy, the spiritual, because those words refer to things that only religious people get to talk about. But this is wrong for two reasons. Firstly, because people who aren't religious can still intelligently talk about religion, and many academics who spend their whole lives thinking about religion are in fact not religious themselves or not a member of the religion that they write and think about. There's nothing wrong with that. It's part of intellectual inquiry to investigate movements, traditions, philosophical worldviews that you yourself don't hold. But secondly, and more importantly, humanists have plenty to say about sacredness, holiness, spirituality, because from a humanist point of view, those are all human constructs, ways of understanding our experience. Humanists believe that we created God. We created religious rituals and stories and ideas in order to help us navigate life and deal with its challenges. And because of that, all of religion is in fact part of our natural cultural inheritance. And everyone can talk about that. Humanists are capable of having transcendent experiences, having spiritual experiences, plumbing the depths of existential questions, just like everybody else, because these things are all deeply human. So humanists do have something to say about religion. And finally, number one, the biggest misconception about humanism of all, or perhaps not the biggest one, it may just be the one that annoys me the most. This is honestly my pet peeve. I really dislike hearing it. It really makes me annoyed. So I thought I'd put it number one in my video. The idea that humanism is derivative of Christianity. I saved this one for last, just because it is around so much right now and it really annoys me. Humanism is not just some decayed or twisted or heretical form of Christianity. I blame historian Tom Holland for the current popularity of this argument, although it's been around for absolutely decades. Since as long as humanism has been a self-aware movement, people have been saying that it is basically Christianity in disguise. It would be impossible in this short video to say all the ways that that argument is mistaken. But here are a couple. Firstly, the roots of contemporary humanism stretch back before Christianity, and humanistic ideas can be found in pre-Christian cultures and writings. And I'm not just talking about ancient Greece here, which is where many humanists trace some of the first flowerings of humanistic ideas. I'm also talking about ancient China, for example, where there were philosophical ideas that were very similar to contemporary humanist thought that we mine for wisdom today. So there were pre-Christian thinkers who were articulating some humanistic ideas, and those are important to us, and it's important not to ignore that. Secondly, there are major differences between traditional Christian ethics and philosophy and humanistic ethics and philosophy. Were this not the case, just think about it. Were this not the case, then we would not see so many disagreements between humanist organizations and Christian denominations on major political issues. Think about arguments about abortion, about assisted dying, that was a huge issue in the UK recently, about same-sex marriage. On many of those issues, you often see humanists and Christian organizations on opposite sides of the debate. And it's very difficult to understand how this is if humanistic ethics is just derivative of Christian ethics. In fact, I think that one of the weird things about this argument is it completely misrepresents Christian ethics. And that's a strange thing in an argument that seems to be wanting to promote the importance of Christianity, that it doesn't seem to understand Christian thinking at all. But I'll make a whole video about that later. I could go off on it for hours, and I won't. Now, it's certainly true that Christian thought has influenced humanism to some degree. That's undeniable, and I know no humanist philosopher, historian, or thinker who would deny that. But contemporary humanism draws from many pre-Christian and non-Christian philosophies as well. And humanist philosophy differs dramatically from Christian philosophy in ways that make a profound difference to the conclusions we draw on some of the most important political questions of our time. So humanism and Christianity are simply different traditions with some radically different assumptions and some very different conclusions. Humanism is not simply derivative from Christianity. So there you have it. Those were my 10 biggest misconceptions about humanism, the things I hear time and time again as a professional humanist that really annoy me. Hopefully this has helped you learn a little bit about humanism. Maybe you disagree with something that I said. Make a comment. I'd love to engage with you. If you like this video, give it a like. If you loved my voice, subscribe to my channel. This has been James with Deep Humanism. See you later.